Hello everyone. Welcome back to Intro to Python. I am Anish Pai, your host for this series. Last video, we explored the meaning behind Python and wrote our first simple code, printing Hello World. Today, let's dive into some more basic concept ideas, shall we? Firstly, let's look at one of the most important things you need to get clear when you're typing in Python or pretty much any other programming language out there. This is variables. For those who don't know, a variable is any object that can store a specific piece of information and can interact with other parts of a code. So, for example, a variable may be a number or a piece of text or a symbol, or it can be literally anything that you want. If you're still unsure, let's write this to make it a little bit more clear, shall we? We have a code from last time. Hopefully, all of you went home and tried printing some more things. If you have any questions, just leave them down in the comments or email us anytime you feel like. So, yes, let's move on. Variables. A variable is anything that can store value. So, let's talk about what a variable can be. A variable in Python can be anything other than a number or any piece of text that holds importance to the Python library. So if let's say the number one can't be a variable, the word print can't be a variable. So okay, I'll explain this in a second. Let's start by looking at what a variable can be. A variable can be any piece of text, including the term variable. So if I say variable and I put an equal to sign, what this is basically doing is it's telling Python I want the word variable to equal to something, and every time I write variable in my code, I want whatever comes after equal to represent what variable says. So let's say I say by variable I say hello world. Now every time I write variable again in my code, Python's again gonna point back to hello world. That way, let's say if I had a really long sentence, rather than copy pasting it, I could just write variable everywhere. So let me give you an example of how I could use this. Remember how we learned the print statement last class? So if I did print now, rather than actually writing hello world, I can simply just write variable. I don't even need double quotes or anything. Once I write variables and I run, shows me hello world, even though in the brackets it says variables. This is because as soon as I put variables, Python points to hello world, which is then what it prints. Now I know this might not seem useful to some people because obviously right now the word and the length of the word is the same thing, but imagine the sentence was something like hello world. This is my second intro sorry, intro to Python video. Right? And I could just have my variable name saved as V. What would be easier? To write this whole sentence again here or to just simply write V? Obviously, to simply write V would be easier, and still it shows you everything you want. And that is exactly why variables are helpful. Another thing that you could store in variables are numbers. So let's say I could say 9, and then I could have another variable called x, and I could give it 8. And then I could go to my print statement and I could say print v plus x. Let's see what happens. Hopefully it works. See, perfect. 9 plus 8 is 17. So you can also use variables to add up things like this. Again, I know some people might say, why not just say 9 plus 8 there? But what if I was supposed to do print v minus x? Then I was supposed to say print sorry, yeah, print v divided by x, and my v and x won the shot. My v and x were 98478. it was something like that, and let's say x was something like this, I would have to write all of these numbers in the exact same order again here, and that would take far longer than just writing v and x, correct? So again, I can get my answer within seconds, but if it wasn't for these variables, then it would take me a lot longer to do everything. Also, using variables just makes your code that bit more professional and makes it shorter usually. And I know why some of you, when you think of programming, you think of hundreds and thousands of lines of code and people writing more and more. But I'm going to be honest with you. The main point of programming and the main thing you should always be after is how can I do this the shortest? What is this least amount of code I could write to achieve my purpose? Because least amount of code is what's efficient. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, why it was it when I wrote a text-based thing, I had to put double quotes, and only then I could write "Hello World." But when I wrote a number, I had no double quotes or anything. Straight away, just wrote the number. Well, I don't know how many of you remember, but last class I said something about data types and strings, and that is one of the main things we're going to cover today. Now, in Python, in the beginning stage, there are three main data types. There's integers, strings, and floats. So for integers, the Python term is int. Sorry. Yeah. For strings, the Python term is str, which is stands for string. And for floats, it is float, or just the way it stands. Now, an integer in Python can be stored in a variable without quotations. Oh yeah, so these are the three types of variables that can be stored. So now an integer is a type that can be stored without any quotation marks, but it always has to be a number. And if an integer is not a number, it will give you an error because Python can't just handle text in its library because that is beyond its capability and it's beyond the capability of any programming language, to be honest. Now, next, we have strings. What a string does is it basically saves a particular form of text as a painting, basically. So if I let's say I save an integer in my code. Okay, let me go back to my code. Let's say I save my integer in my code. Let's say v equals to 10. Now I can interact with the v. I can do things like uh give me v plus 10, which would then give me 20. And when I run the code, yes, it gives me 20. But what I can't do is if as soon as I put any double quotes here, and now if I do this, it will give me an error because it says cannot concatenate a string, which means it cannot add or subtract anything to a string. Why is that? Well, every single time that you put these double quotes on a particular variable, program just stops thinking about what the variable is in and just saves it as a giant painting in your head. So it's like it's not a number anymore, it's just a painting. It remembers it and it can copy it back somewhere or it can paste it somewhere, but it doesn't understand it. It just has a picture in its brain. Now, while for numbers it's usually more useful to just use the integer variable and just not do anything. If I was to straight away write strings here, so like my message, hello world, I was to straight away write this here. Python wouldn't understand it because, yeah, invalid syntax. Because in Python, all the text that we write is already stored in it's hard coded into Python. It's stored in its library. So there is no real way for it to differentiate between any text that we write and text that's actually stored in its uh, modules. So due to that, putting any text in Python, meaning Python will think of the text as a command, even though the text is not actually a command, and therefore it will get into an error, which is why we use strings. So through the use of strings, Python will say, I mean, we use quotation marks. And as soon as you use quotation marks, Python will say, okay, this is a painting. I remember it's this painting. I can copy it somewhere. I don't have to focus on it. And as soon as you do that, you are telling Python that I don't want to change this. I just want it to remain how it is. I'm not gonna add anything, I'm not gonna subtract anything. This is final. So even if so, let's say I had two strings. If I was to write 9 plus 10 here, and I had another string, and I was to write in double quotations this time 9 plus 10. First one would work because it's integers, so it's two integer values. So Python would be like, okay, let's take a look. No double commas. Oh, it's numbers. I understand numbers. So it's 9 plus 10, 19. But if it was strings, Python would immediately be like, oh my God, that's strings. No, I do not understand this. Not looking at it. So it would give us, it wouldn't do anything. It would just simply print 9 plus 10 like it was just copy pasting from somewhere. Oh, never mind. I did not actually print them. That is my print v and print x. See, the first one it printed 19, whereas in the second one it still printed 9 plus 10, even though they're basically the same thing with the only difference of there being a comma. So while for numbers, commas, double quotation marks aren't usually used when you're writing a text, because like I said, and now this is like the third time I'm saying it, Python does not understand letters unless it's a command. So every single time you use a text or you're saving a text, remember to put double quotation marks, otherwise you will run into an error. So now let's go back. Now we understand what integers are. They're just any real number. By real number, I mean any number from negative infinity to positive infinity. Then we understand what strings are. Strings can be anything. They can be characters like underscores. They can be letters. They can even be numbers, but Python won't understand any of it. Python will take it as a painting, copy it, paste it wherever you want it to paste. And then there is one more way. Oh, sorry, I keep doing this. There's one more important type of variable that exists in Python. It is called floats. Now, I'm going to give you an explanation that's a bit confusing. Trust me, I was also confused the first time, even after looking at tons of resources. But a float basically holds a decimal value, and it is used to define decimal values with more precision. Now, you might ask me, Anish, but you said integers can be any real numbers, and that includes decimals. And you're not wrong. Integers can hold decimals, yes. But the thing is, they can only hold decimals to a certain decimal place. So if I was to write, I don't know, 1203 divided by something like this, which would be probably an infinitive decimal answer, what should be correct, exactly correct now? It's probably going to be a definitive answer. Oh my god, it was actually a whole number. Oh, okay, Z plus, never mind. Yeah. So let's say I do something like this. Now, I know this number is going to be infinitively long. There's a very high chance that it's going to be an infinite number. Let's me put a decimal point and then now for sure it's going to be a very long number. But when I run this, it only gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 decimal places. But the thing with floats are they will give you a lot more precise answer. And when I say precise answer means they will give you a lot more precise decimals, which is where floats are used. So floats are used in places where you need like exact answer or a much more precise answer than what integers give you. But trust me, for this course and like until you're building proper algorithms where you require answers precise to like the 17th decimal place, trust me, integer should be just fine, and you don't really need to worry about the float variable as of now. So we have learned about all three variable types. One important thing that you need to know is if you have a string, let's say we equals to 10, and string is a number. There's a number inside the string. I remember how I said it was a painting and it can copy paste it anywhere. Well, one thing it can do, and this is something very important which we'll learn about when you're taking inputs next class, is that Python, even though it doesn't understand string, it has the ability to convert strings into something else. So it can read the string without understanding, and if it sees that the string is an integer, it can actually convert it into an actual number. So if I have another variable saying x and I say int, which stands for integer, and I say int v, and now if was to say if I was to say print v plus 10, I would get an error, right? See, v is not defined because oh wait, actually that's not the error I was looking for. Yeah, because we okay, yeah. Oh, because I put it in caps lock. My bad. Okay, so now if I do v plus 10, yes, there we go. It says can only concatenate strings, not integers. So so therefore we know that it can't add to a string. But if we were to put this line after where we changed v into an integer, and I said print x plus 10, I would so so if I was to type this, I would get 20. See, so what happened here is Python looked at it as a string, and when I first asked it to add 9 plus 10, it said, oops, not possible. But later on, when I converted it into an integer, I was successfully able to perform operations with it, and that is the main difference between integers and strings. You can't perform operations with strings, but you can with integers. But integers only store numbers, while strings can store anything in the world, and they can be as long as you want. Thanks for watching, everybody, and that is intro for Python lesson 2. If you want to practice some more at home, play around with your variables, do these print statements, try adding oh, two strings together, try adding two variables together. Just mix around, have fun, and hope to see you next time. Bye.